Greetings, I'm Rob Redden, and I appreciate you listening to this message and sharing it with your friends. For those of you that are new, I'm the minister for the Grover Beach Church of Christ on the beautiful Central Coast of California. I've been talking about sins of the tongue and of the heart. We covered improper anger, proper anger, and we've been talking about the evil use of the tongue and our relationship with other people. And last week we discussed the attitude that we have in criticizing others, whether it be for a positive reason or not, and how we should be careful how we offer our suggestions. And today we're going to talk about how to handle criticism ourselves. I've titled this, Taking the Sting Out of Criticism. The verse that I want to share with you is Proverbs 25:12. Like an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold is a wise reprover to a listening ear. Well, I know it's difficult to avoid criticism. If you do anything, you may be criticized. If you do nothing, you will get criticized. And let's face it, criticism hurts. We all have fragile egos, and when we receive it, we get knocked down some. And to say we shouldn't receive criticism is to be in a serious state of denying our imperfections and mistakes, or we're so callous we don't really care how we affect other people. But I'm sure that those of you that are viewing this video are concerned about your Christian behavior, as I also am of mine. Cicero states, "It is the peculiar quality of a fool to perceive the faults of others, but to forget his own." And one also said, adverse criticism from a wise man is more to be desired than the enthusiastic approval of a fool. You know, I have received a lot of criticism about my preaching, and it centers on being too complicated, too academic, too much Greek or Hebrew, or I may belabor a point to death. I confess, I've been guilty of every one of those things, and I can say that I still fall into that category from time to time. And so I agree it is well deserved. Have I resented such advice? Maybe in my younger years, but no, I don't. I have taken the advice. Not always, but I am aware of the challenges. You see, here's my rationale. I want those who hear me to get as excited as I am about biblical truth. And I believe dumbing down a message is an insult to people's intelligence. But I also know that I have my head in academia so much that I forget I'm not talking to the majority who have their PhDs. One has to know one's audience. And If you're writing for professors on a postgraduate level, you obviously are writing on that level. But if an educated man cannot communicate his ideas to a fifth grader, he's obviously not as educated as he thinks he is. So that hits me hard. One brother who has passed away kindly told me that I should be in a teaching position somewhere in a college or some school of evangelism. I've been offered a teaching position, but I declined because I love ministry. And I would not want to be stuck in a classroom every day and isolated from my brothers and sisters, nor would I want to be limited on the subjects that I teach over and over and over for many years. I love ministry because I love people, and I'm evangelistic minded. I want to save souls, but I also want to equip souls to be able to defend the faith and be grounded in the faith. So I do work on my issues, and I'm a work in progress just as you are. Even after 50 years of preaching, don't believe you cannot teach an old dog new tricks. I want to offer a few tips that may smooth the rough spots or taking the sting out of criticism. In the first place, consider the value of criticism. Not all criticism is necessarily of any value, of course. Nitpicking, just ultra-critical remarks are of no value. Nitpicking is defined as pointing out minor flaws in a fussy or pedantic way. Now, pedantic simply means overly concerned about minor details. Giving too much attention to details that are not important, especially as a way of criticizing. And of course, we may be criticized about something that wasn't our fault. But we are the easy target, and people hold us accountable for everything that others do. We may be particularly good at what we do, and it provokes envy or jealousy. And so maybe a person who's very envious or jealous or threatened seek to bring us down by finding things to criticize. It happens. Or for unintentionally saying or doing something that was inappropriate but wasn't unintentional. Of course, if that's pointed out, we could still apologize. But there is legitimate criticism, and we know that. When we deliberately do something wrong in our actions, failed actions, saying something or not saying something, and someone realizes that, and so they make a suggestion, that's criticism. The word is not a bad word. Context determines whether it's good or bad. Or it may be we had a bad attitude. We're human and our emotions kind of take over sometimes, and we may display a bad attitude. We may not be feeling well, or we may have been disappointed. You know, maybe we didn't do well in our job performance. Maybe we failed expectations. Maybe it was just downright poor performance, or a failure to follow protocol for misrepresentations. These are a few things that come to my mind, but consider the value of knowing somebody cares enough to point out those things that could help us grow and become more spiritual minded, more Christ-like minded, more sanctified in spirit. But consider the value. It's a source of information we may need. It may be after the fact, but it also may be foreseen in the future and we can avoid it. And it may be one of our best motivations for self-improvement. If one looks upon the person who offers the criticism as a coach, it may help rather than harm. Spiritually, we hope people care enough to offer loving reminder that more is expected of us from the Lord. Here's some verses in Proverbs. Chapter 15, verse 5. He who regards reproof is prudent. Verse 10. He who hates reproof will die. Verse 31. He whose ear listens to the life-giving reproof will dwell among the wise. Verse 32. He who neglects discipline despises himself, but he who listens to reproof acquires understanding. Proverbs 9 and verse 8. Reprove a wise man and he will love you. And of course, my text that began this lesson, Proverbs 25:12, like an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold is a wise reprover to a listening ear. And we need to remember even the best get criticized. And so if you're criticized, if I'm criticized, we know that we're in good company because everyone can empathize. We're in good company. Religious leaders receive criticism even if they are living on bread and water or feed the poor. If they retire too well, they get criticized. If they retire poor, they were poor stewards of their money. Can't win in many situations. And you've got to be a glutton for punishment to run for political office, as we have seen. And I've watched ball games where famous athletes, baseball players who are in a slump, or basketball players that can't put a basketball in the Pacific Ocean, get booed because of their slumps. But it's a common phenomenon in sports, and it's true in everything we do. No one is immune. Criticism is our national pastime. But we need to determine if the criticism is intended to be constructive or destructive. We talked about this in the previous lesson. Christians must offer constructive criticism. And we need to know the difference. If it seeks to help and build up, then it is intended to be constructive. If it is personal, it isn't constructive. And I think pretty much we can sort of intuit that with somebody who comes up to us and offers criticism. Is the comment logically thought out or just spewed as hurtful remarks? Usually if somebody is in the background and offers a critical remark, usually their heart isn't right. Was the intention to score points at your expense or to build or protect his or her self-esteem? To impress onlookers with their courage and their power? And so we need to ask ourselves about the subject of the criticism and see if it's more personal rather than something else. Are the comments about your personality, your appearance, attempt to control you or make you feel guilty? Or is it about a mistake, something regarding a problem to solve? The bottom line, ask ourselves if the person is trying to hurt us or improve the situation. And if I'm not sure yet, ask, are you wanting us to try to work out this problem? What do you recommend to do together to solve this problem? And before we leave this point, please recognize not everyone is good at tact or diplomacy. Some have never learned the social graces needed to offer criticism and advice in a way that is taken in a constructive way. Although they may be very sincerely intended for it to come out that way. Usually, if we know the person, we already know that, and we can evaluate the criticism much better. And so, regardless, and I mentioned this last week, try to learn something of value from every criticism, regardless of the manner or the spirit it is given. This is a tall order. But as a Christian, we will want to improve our life in every aspect of our being. And none of this is me, I'm happy just the way I am, and if people don't like it, there's the door. What kind of Christian attitude is that? In 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23, Paul says this, though I am free from all men, I have made myself a slave to all that I might win the more. In other words, he's going to sacrifice his rights if they're not biblical doctrine for the benefit of others. Verse 20, and to the Jew I became a Jew, that I might win the Jews, and to those under law, as under law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those who are under the law of Moses. Verse 21, to those who are without the law, that is the Gentiles, as without the law, though not being without law to God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those who are without the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I may by all means save some. And I do all things for the sake of the gospel, that I may become a fellow partaker of it. In other words, Paul is realizing that you can just cling to your opinion or your rights to a point that it will harm others when it wasn't really necessary. So we have to keep an eye open for those situations that we must be very careful how we employ our liberties among those who may not be as strong in the faith as we are, or as we think. And so from this, I think people need to give an invitation to criticize only if you mean it. If you're looking for improvement, be vulnerable and ask for help to improve. No athlete ever became great by only listening to praise. It may be inappropriate to say anything in response in a group. So we've got to consider the setting before we decide how to respond to criticism. You know, if it's public and someone says something, we could kindly say, could we talk about that privately? Let's meet somewhere in private to discuss this, please. I think they will get the point. Or I'm uncomfortable here to discuss this. Thanks for your concern, but let's agree to meet somewhere else later to discuss this further. Furthermore, I think we need to stifle the urge to offer an immediate denial. We're often just like children You did. No, I did not. Yes, you did. I did not. You don't know what you're talking about. May be true, but perhaps withholding the truth for a while may help the person to see this in a better light. Maybe they'll regret what they said. And listen to someone's criticism without interrupting them. Are you serious? Stop right there. I'm not listening to this. No. Be Christian about it. Listen, because they may have something very important to say that may be very helpful, but it may not have started out right. And along with this, squash the urge to counterattack, tit for tat. And you know what that means. Eye for an eye, so to speak. If you criticize me, I'm going to criticize you back. Quite frankly, this is very childish, but we do it, don't we? And this is probably the most natural response. It's a knee-jerk response because a nerve has been touched. When the urge to get even or to top the critic, the original issue is lost in the process, and it's about something else, and it's not good. Along with this, we need to stifle the urge to rationalize. This response seems to use legitimate logical excuses for one's actions, but not the reason. We may suggest that the situation was saved from being a worse mess by our noble actions. Or we could excuse our actions by pointing to others who make worse mistakes. Could have been worse. Rationalizing just makes the person that may be offering good advice shake their head and say, it's not going to do any good here. One loses integrity by rationalizing. And nor should we play the blame game. It's not my fault. It was the clock's fault. I was late. I overslept because I never got my wake-up call from the desk to get to the meeting on time. Sure, there are times when we're asked why, and if the reason was beyond our control, don't lay the blame on everyone or everything else. Usually the boss can see how it could have been prevented if one used a little foresight of such possibilities. For example, if the electricity went out because of a storm and the report could not be printed on time, the boss may say, how can you blame the power outage when you could have gotten that report prepared and printed several weeks ago? Now you have to wipe the egg off your face, right? Another point. When we receive criticism, we need to separate opinion from fact. Opinions are often subjective. That means it springs from emotions, biases, presuppositions, rather than on objective facts. Descriptions are factual comments about what you said or did. Someone may give you or me an opinion, and opinions may be true or false. There's an opinion of the flat earth followers. That opinion is false. So all opinions are not equal. Some are false, some are true, some may or may not be true. And so the best way to determine this is to ask for facts to back up the criticism that might be based on opinion. But once again, based upon what we've already suggested, the manner in which we ask for the facts has to be a humble expression. Instead of saying, Give me the facts. You're just giving me the opinion. No. No. We need to simply say, could you elaborate more on this? Because all I'm picking up is an opinion, and I certainly want to value your opinion, but could you give me some information, some evidence that your opinion is better than mine? I'm open to a suggestion. I just need to know why you came up with that idea. So if the facts speak for themselves and a fair appraisal is made, I'll apologize and thank them and promise to give it your utmost consideration. Then ask for feedback if you have improved. That will help the person to see sincerity. After all, a person who offered the criticism may not accept criticism as magnanimous as you have, and it may change their estimation of you and see you in a different light. I'm going to stop with this next one and complete this lesson next week, if the Lord wills. Consider the source. It's a lot easier to listen to criticism coming from someone you really care about. And you know how much they care about you. But if you have over time picked up the vibes that there's some distance between you in spite of your efforts to become a good friend, and it just seems like nothing fixes that, and there seems to be a little competition, then you know that perhaps that criticism is coming from their emotional needs rather than your needs. Is this person qualified to make this judgment? Is this person the right person to offer criticism? Is this person biased against you and your performance? Does he want your job? Does the person just want to spread rumors about you? Or are they refusing to take responsibility for the criticism and telling you what they heard? In such situations, one could respond and say, without knowing who has actually said what specifically, I can't really take any corrective action. I need specifics. What we have tried to do is give some guidelines to help us to take the sting out of criticism. And again, we all are going to be criticized. But is it a deal breaker with this person that we will never like the person ever again? Or has it reached a point that the criticism hurt you so deeply that you cut all ties with that person? I'm sure that it's happened to you. It's happened to me. When we give criticism. But when we receive it, aren't we supposed to work it out and resolve our differences and come to harmony? I think the Lord wants us to do that. Next week, we will continue this study. And I hope that you'll be able to tune into this message and view the video next week. Invite a friend. And before I close, let me invite you to the Grover Beach Church of Christ meeting at 202 South 8th Street, 8th and Rockaway, South 8th and Rockaway in Grover Beach, California, 1 block south of the main street, Grand Avenue, at 11 o'clock. and we'll be waiting for you, and a cordial welcome awaits you. And again, be sure to check out a Church of Christ near you. I'm sure you can find the information where they are, their times of service. We are a unique fellowship. We adhere strictly to the Word of God. We don't add anything or take anything away. If God commands it, we will do it. If it has not been commanded, we will not introduce it. What better way to give glory to God and respect his holy word, which is sufficient in all things. As Peter says, he's given us all things that pertain to life and godliness. And he didn't withhold anything that would accomplish that. And for us to want more says he didn't give us all things to accomplish that. I want you to know that I'm praying for you and wishing you the best, and may God keep you until we meet again. Goodbye.